Welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and we have a very special guest today, people. I've been telling you for weeks, and I'm sorry I didn't do it sooner. Chill out. Telling you for weeks, I want to start getting some of the best fantasy football minds from the industry back here on this podcast, with so many finally getting back in their drafts. You know, I hope you've enjoyed the Fantasy Files series, some of the professional athletes we've been able to get on this podcast. At the end of the day, you want to know who to pick to win your league, and I want to start having these larger, general, position-specific, just more topical podcast now that we're actually close to fantasy draft. So I want to talk all things quarterbacks today. And again, very special guest to help me do so. He is the connoisseur of context, fake football meteorologist at Sharp Football Analysis, the Swami of Konami, fellow fast talker, fellow we don't actually have ourselves pictured in our Twitter avatar guy, Rich Hribar, who you all know already as at Lord Reebs on Twitter. Rich, thanks so much for the time, man. How's it going?
Yeah, and fellow Ohio fantasy football brethren.
That's it.
So we've got a lot of overlap. You kind of hit on something in the lead-in that, you know, I've been thinking about with training camps opening this week. You know, this is kind of the official kickoff of where the casual fans are starting. This is where it picks up and the general public comes back. You know, we had this 2-week period, maybe 3 weeks, where, you know, the running back dead zone got exploited. Everyone was in on it. Wide receivers moved all those draft boards. Let's see if this next month those wide receivers start to drop a little bit. The running backs start to go back highly again. But yeah, this is the month where we pick up and everyone's coming in and getting on a football mindset.
People are already doing a bad job of not taking training camp news too seriously. We got people actually believing Tom Brady threw 3 straight footballs into a jug machine and got shot back out. Today, the rumor was that Kelvin Benjamin got released for stealing food from the cafeteria. No, people, that is not true. Be better, but it is funny. And I'm just happy the timeline's filled with football again, as you were saying, Rich. So as I said in the lead, we are going all things quarterbacks on this episode. You know, we'll obviously pay a little more attention to the top guys, but we'll try to touch on basically the top 20, top 25 guys one way or another. And Rich starts at the top. A 2018 QB1 was Patrick Mahomes. 2019 QB1, Lamar Jackson. Josh Allen took the crown in 2020. Who are you drafting and expecting to be 2021's overall QB1?
Well, I mean, I'm not drafting because I'm not going to draft the first quarterback in my draft, nor should you guys. I mean, it's a chalky answer, but the player with the best odds obviously is Patrick Mahomes. I mean, you look at what he's done so far to start his career. He's been the QB1, the QB6, and the QB2 in fantasy points per game his 3 seasons as a starter. He leads all quarterbacks in fantasy games of 20-plus points, 30 of those, and games with 3 or more passing touchdowns, 21 of those since he became a starting quarterback. He just has the best kind of the plurality. He's mobile too. He's run more the past, year and a half, basically ever since he came back from that weird kneecap injury. He's been really mobile. So you get kind of the best of both worlds with Mahomes. I will say though that there is a definite buy the dip situation with Lamar Jackson, especially as we talked about more casual leagues start to get underway here. You know, your home leagues, the guy that took Lamar Jackson first is probably not going to want him, at all this year. And he might drop to QB4, QB5, maybe sometimes even lower because we've got such a good pocket of quarterbacks at the top. But we knew that regression was coming for Lamar Jackson last year. I mean, he was on a team that scored on 57% of their drives. He won the league MVP. We knew that the regression was coming. People, I think, overcooked that regression into kind of his future outlook. And we've seen him kind of get going the second half of the season. I would buy the dip on him for sure. He is my QB2. If he wants to follow that QB4, QB5 range in your draft, I mean, I would gobble him up. Interesting enough, Josh Allen is now in that same position that Lamar Jackson was in last year. The Bills, they scored on 55% of their drives last year. It was the highest rate in the NFL. They punted on just 26% of their drives in 2020. It was the lowest mark in the league since 1999. And then you look at teams like the Bills last year. Of the previous 20 teams that led the league in scoring rate per drive, not one of them came back and scored at a higher rate the following year. So there is going to be a little bit of recoil with the Bills as well. The good news is that we have a pretty good example in fantasy of Josh Allen being a stable fantasy quarterback while he was a bad passer. So we do his drop's not going to be precipitous, but I think that a lot of people that take him at QB1, QB2 are not factoring in some of that recoil that we saw with Lamar Jackson. Fantasy likes to eat its own tail a lot. And, I think we'll see Josh Allen at 6.5% touchdown rate kind of come back down, a little bit. And we'll see some kind of, teams kind of really slow the Bills down. We saw it towards the end of last year too. I mean, you look in the playoffs, Spags obviously got him both times. times last year, because where Josh Allen still did struggle, even his breakout, was against pressure. I mean, he had 8.6 yards per pass attempt when kept clean, 6.6 yards per attempt under pressure. That was that 2 yards per difference under pressure versus kept clean was the 25th largest differential in the league. So he still does have a little bit of hiccups, but like I said, with him just being a bulldozer, being arguably probably the strongest quarterback in the league now that we can count on for a full season, because we can't count on for Cam Newton. They're going to have a safe floor at Josh Allen, but I do think that just rolling over last year's stats to Josh Allen will probably leave you feeling a lot like people felt with Lamar Jackson at the end of last season.
Starting at the top, Patrick Mahomes, he's averages the most fantasy points per game ever among any quarterback ever. He's the one. He's our one. He's your one. My one. Whoever's listening to it, probably your one. We get that. I will say though, man, you, me, Evan Silva, and Johnny Daigle on the last ever Roto World Friday night best ball stream. We did it about 6 weeks ago. First and last. If you happen to tune in to anyone out there, you saw a lot of cursing, a lot of whiskey drinking, a lot of good laughs. A horrendous fantasy football team was, picked between us alleged experts on that. But throughout all that, there was one really big takeaway I had, and that was basically what you were just talking about with Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. And the big thing Evan said was just like, don't draft in 2021 just based on what happened in 2020. These guys are going to, don't want to just hang the R word out in every single answer, but they are going to regress because it's so damn hard to be that good again. Aaron Rodgers is not going to throw a touchdown on over 9% of his attempts again this year, because who the hell can do that anyway? You can't do it back-to-back years. It's just so hard for them to keep that sustainable high level rate. And for Lamar, man, he owns the top 3 seasons in rush attempts by a QB in NFL history. That floor is so hard to come by that when it does look at between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, I'm leaning Lamar now as my QB2. I'm with you on that. And Josh Allen, even with the touchdown rate regressing, man, I wonder too, pretty soon the Bills are going to have 9 figures worth of reasons to not let this dude have a top 3 run rate inside the 10-yard line. I know you can't always pull the YOLO, the DJAF ball out of Josh Allen. He's gotten a lot better at not, throwing double covered passes to his fullback in a playoff game in recent history. But I just don't know if he's going to continue to have this, top design run rate. That's why I like Zach Moss as a late round runner and all that. So it's a tough call, but I do think Lamar deserves to be the QB2, and I'm happy to hear that you're on the same page. Now, someone that's also in this mix, tier 1 quarterback, Kyler Murray. Big news bit that I think came out before training camp. Otherwise, it'd be getting, a ton of attention. Kyler wants to depend a little bit less on his legs in the running game. Obviously, last year, that was pretty much the only consistent good part of this offense, other than when they threw the ball to DeAndre Hopkins. Are you buying this the case? And do you think Kyler's going to again be, threatening for the position rushing league? Or do you have to worry about Kyler as more of a pocket passer?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't expect him to lead all quarterbacks in rushing points again like he did last year, because, he didn't have as many yards as Lamar, but he had the 11 rushing touchdowns. Murray's rushing production accounted for 44.6% of his fantasy output last year after just 30.6% as a rookie. I think we'll see some merging of those two worlds, but stuff like that is always kind of wishful thinking. When feet are to the fire, I mean, I believe the Cardinals and Murray are going to do what they have to do in the moment to win games and to move the sticks. And you look at last year, Kyler Murray, I mean, through 9 games last year, he was dominant. I mean, he was averaging just under 30 points per fantasy game. He was a top 5 scorer in 7 of his first 9 games. Obviously, he has a shoulder injury, kind of never really bounces back, from that point on. The thing about Kyler that is really intriguing about him from a fantasy stance is that he just has so much more room to grow as a passer, which not a lot of people, take into account. He did lift his completion percentage, his yards per pass attempt, and his touchdown rate over his rookie season numbers. But if you look at passer rating index and how those things compare to league averages, he was still right around the base rate just about everywhere, and below the watermark in a number of categories. And where he can really get aided is if the Cardinals and Kliff just kind of get out of their own way and stop putting Kyler Murray in such terrible situations. I mean, look at last year. Arizona was 27th in the NFL in first down passing rate. Unlike a team like the Ravens with Lamar Jackson, Arizona was just 20th in yards per rushing play on first down, and they averaged just 3.9 yards per carry amongst the running backs when they ran with the running backs in those situations. So with that, Murray ended the season 31st in the league in percentage of pass attempts to come on first down. Yet when he threw on first down and the Cardinals threw the ball on first down, he was 7th amongst all quarterbacks in completion rate, 14th in yards per attempt in those situations. But then when you look at when Arizona was pressed into obvious passing passing situations because they didn't throw the football enough on first down. His efficiency just crumbled. 39.1% of his pass attempts came in bad situations, which are second and third downs, needing 7 or more yards to go. And he was in the bottom of the league in efficiency in almost all of those spots. So if Kliff can kind of get out of his own way, they can kind of gear and be up more for being the air raid, or I call it the horizontal raid. They aren't raiding the air in early downs at all. And then when you look at Kyler too, I think the one last like feather in a cap he has outside of just going back to the front half last season when everything was firing in all capacity. I mean, his opening schedule is just amazing. I mean, he opens with Tennessee, the Vikings, so we think will be better, and the Jaguars. And in 16 career games against bottom half defenses, he's averaged 260 passing yards per game and 7.8 yards per attempt, as opposed to 6.4 yards per attempt and just 220 passing yards per game otherwise. So, I mean, he definitely is in contention as well with that first group that we talked about earlier to be the QB1 overall.
Yeah, he's absolutely in that top tier. Look, the best single season fantasy quarterback we've ever seen was 2019 Lamar Jackson, 27.7 fantasy points per game. As you brought up in those first 9 games, Kyler was at 29.3. Like, we have evidence of Kyler being capable of being the most productive fantasy quarterback ever. You can't say that about many professional football players. And for Kyler, we can. Would also bring up last year, Lamar Jackson said the same thing in the offseason. Now, he wasn't going to lean on his legs as much. 8.3 rush attempts before the Ravens bye, 12.1 rush attempts per game after. Kyler, it's great that he wants to say this, but if the offense is coming out and they're averaging 20 points per game with him not running, I think we're going to see that, shift in his mind pretty quickly. I am just worried about Kliff though, man. It's that one quote from after they drafted Rondale where he goes, "We got Hopkins, we got AJ," and now Rondale slides into the other group. It's like, no, why is AJ being given the benefit of the doubt over Rondale, over Christian Kirk, over Andy Isabella, over any of these guys? Unfortunately, it might be the case. Here's the hope, and Kliff can figure this out in 2021 and beyond. Now, Rich, we're talking about Kyler, Patrick, Lamar, definitely tier 1 guys. The other 2 guys I got in my tier 1, Dak Prescott and obviously Josh Allen too, but Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson right there at number 6. Who do you think has the better chance of being the overall QB1, Dak or Russ?
I think between the two, it's obviously I'm going to go with Dak, just because when you factor in overall offensive climate, being younger, the division kind of schedule outlook, not playing in the NFC West, just all kind of favor Dak. I mean, you look at in 2019, not even going back last year, he was the QB3 in points per game. And then last year, he obviously, until he had that really bad ankle injury, was number 1 in points per game through those 5 games, just due to the offensive climate and them just having to go just bananas, catching points up, the second half of almost every one of those games. He was also averaging a career high 5.5 point rushing points per game last year as well. So we're gonna have to wait to see if the ankle has any impact in that area. If there's any kind of, it slows him down a little bit. He's not running quite as much, but everything is still in place for Dak Prescott to really thrive in fantasy. And you see a lot of people trying to build cowboy stacks earlier and get sniped on Dak and really be angry. But I will say this about Russell Wilson though, because I don't want to leave him for dead either, is I really am excited to see the Seattle offense and what they do with Sean Waldron. I mean, this is a team that's going to run a lot more West Coast yak-centric type of incorporate a lot of those kind of concepts. Whereas, under Brian Schottenheimer, they were a lot of team that was run, play action, take deep shots. We saw halfway through the season, a lot of teams gave them a lot of too high safety looks. We saw the clip of DK Metcalf talking to Brandon Marshall about that as well. When teams were able to take that away, Seattle didn't have a great counterpunch. You see them add a guy like Gerald Everett, add a Dwayne Eskridge, who unfortunately starts camp on the PUP list. So we'll monitor that. But they bring in a guy like Sean Waldron, who comes from, not only did he work under Sean McVay, but he worked under Josh McDaniels. He worked under Charlie Weiss. They're going to incorporate a lot of different things. This isn't just going to be a McVayian offense. They're going to bring a lot of things to the table here. And I'm kind of excited to see how the pieces come together, for Russ this year. Because I still believe that he also, obviously, we see every year the first half of the season, he goes bonkers. Let's see if he can go the full 17 weeks now for us.
Just another 2 quarterbacks that have literally last year flashed that overall QB1 upside. I mentioned Lamar's all-time best single season points per game mark. Dak's number 2, if we don't want to, put a game cap limit on it. And Russell Wilson, as great as Kyler was in that first stretch, Russ was right behind him during that same stretch. Now, we don't have the shoulder injury or anything like that to blame Russ. We just have him, having these unstable elements, the deep balls, the broken plays out of the pocket, come back to, just life a little bit, because you can't be that big of a world beater for that long. So I think the rushing upside is really the key factor. Like, will Dak continue to, have this sort of goal line equity? If not, it's going to be the Ezekiel Elliott show. Might be anyway. But with Russ, the one thing that we did see come back last year was 32.1 rushing yards per game. The 2 previous years, it's like they weren't even tapping into that. So Russ is someone that, originally I think I was focusing more, and that's why I was stumbling through the question at first. I was focusing more on my top 5 guys and leaving Russ more in that tier 2. But the more I look at it, I think he probably deserves to be right there in the conversation. And even if we still want to put him in tier 2, he does have that overall QB1 upside. And that Metcalf quote you referenced specifically was, we've been running deep pass ever since Pete got there. Play action, run the ball, go deep. Teams just said, we're not just going to let you all go deep. Hey, it helps that, they had to play the Rams 3 times in that second half, the team that really kind of showed the problems with this and how you could just stay in too high. You got the offensive coordinator from that team. He might know a thing or two about stopping that defense. Here's to hoping that Russ and company figure this out even more in 2021. Now, Rich, we got several second-year quarterbacks that are finding their way in the top 12 ADP. Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert. Just for 2021 redraft, which one of these guys do you want on your squad?
I mean, the guy I'm going to draft the most will be Burrow because he's the cheapest, pretty easily here. Then we'll talk about all these guys. I'll touch on them all a little bit, but definitely Burrow. And you talked about AJ Green just a minute ago with Kyler Murray. Just the fact of removing AJ Green from Joe Burrow's equation it's huge, man. He targeted AJ Green at 19.2% of his passes last season, but they connected on just 45.3% of those passes, 4.7 yards per target, 1 touchdown pass, targeting other Bengal players. Burrow completed 72.8% of his passes, 7.4 yards per target, 12 touchdowns on deep balls. I know the PFF uses 20 yards. I do over 15 yards, but overthrows 15 yards downfield. Burrow and AJ Green connected on just 3 of 27 targets. Everyone knocks Burrow's deep ball. Burrow didn't have a great deep ball. But when Burrow wasn't targeting AJ Green deep, he completed 44.6% of his passes, which was right a little bit of a league baseline rate. So, I mean, just replacing AJ Green with Jamar Chase, and obviously of the shower, narrative in play, just gives Burrow so much more upside, because we're just not wasting, 20%, a fifth of his targets anymore, just into the black void. And he's the cheapest, so I will have those guys. I think Hurts, it's really easy to make the case for Jalen Hurts, and I kind of laid this out to our old NBC Sports Edge now brethren Hayden Wink. So he's asking now, did Jalen Hurts' ADP get here? And it's really easy. One, we have the indoctrination of everyone wants mobile quarterbacks. Sorry about that, guys. And then he has the exact same overlap of the 2 players we just seen break out in Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Nobody thought that Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson had the passing ceilings that they had in the seasons that they just had. No one's going to wait a third year in a row. Not everyone's just going to say, oh, well, we're going to ignore that for a third year in a row because we don't think Jalen Hurts can throw. We just did it for 2 years, and those guys ended up being the QB1 in overall scoring. And I know Allen was the QB3 in points per game, but no one wants to hold that again. So it's factored in. That's factored in to people's mindsets with Jalen Hurts. You don't want to miss again. And then when you look at Jalen Hurts, he was really, he had the fewest amount of pass attempts among rookie quarterbacks from percentage stance from a clean pocket. Brandon Brooks tore his Achilles last year. Lane Johnson missed 9 games. Isaac Samula missed 7 games. They had to go to Jason Peters and bring him back. He ends up missing a ton of time. Overall, it was the most injured offensive line in the NFL in terms of adjusted games lost, just ahead of the Cowboys. We talked about Dak Prescott. So, I mean, you're going to have a healthy offensive line. You add Devontae Smith. There's an out still here for Jalen Hurts to be a lot better of a passer here than he showed in his rookie season. And you look at his rookie season on a per game basis, it looks a lot like the end of Lamar Jackson's rookie season when people had these same conversations coming into 2019, and then Lamar Jackson blows the doors off of everybody. I will say that I am a little worried about the third guy, and we and you have had a couple Twitter exchanges about this. Just because at his draft cost, Justin Herbert, I mean, it feels aggressive because I don't see him as much of a full dual threat option as all the guys we talked about to this point, kind of at that tier, because he goes in ADP, he goes right after those guys. And then he won in some really unique fashions as a rookie that I'm not so sure is sustainable, but I also don't want to knock him for it too, because, when good players make good plays when they're not supposed to. And then you also look at the Chargers there, another team you have to earmark for tighter passing rushing touchdown splits. They had a 72% to 28% passing touchdown to rushing touchdown split. League rate was 62% over the previous previous 10 years, there's been 107 teams that have been over a 70% passing touchdown split. 90 of them went back and had a loss in passing touchdown rate the following season. So I do think the Chargers will have more rushing touchdowns just naturally this year. But then you have to factor in too, we talked about Burrow losing AJ Green. Herbert just losing Anthony Lynn is a huge deal. I talked about it a little bit with Kyler Murray. Last year's Charger staff had Justin Herbert throw 35% of his passes on first down. That was 39th in the NFL. The Chargers had the 10th highest run rate on first downs, despite being 29th in success rate and 29th in yards per running play on those plays. As a byproduct, Justin Herbert led the NFL with 253 pass attempts on second to fourth down, needing 7 or more yards to go. It was 42.5% of his passes that took his profile. But in those bad spots, he converted 38% of those for first downs. That was second in the NFL, and his passing stats just were wild. So he thrived in those like spots he wasn't supposed to thrive in. But then when you look from like a clean pocket, he averaged just 7.1 yards per attempt. That was 31st in the league. That was below Daniel Jones. Ooh. It was below Kyler Murray, who we talked about too. So there is like a little bit of a downside that might not be cooked in. I'm a little more cautious that I'm paying top dollar for Herbert off of his rookie season because I don't want to be 27 Carson Wentz again. And we did it with Baker 2 years ago too. Another guy that doesn't really add a ton of rushing. I think Herbert adds a lot more than Baker does. But I just don't feel like if I miss out on Herbert's best season this year at 80, where he goes in drafts, that it's going to break my teams. Like I'm going to really regret it. So I wish he was a little bit cheaper. I think at ADP, he would be one of the top 10 guys. Like I would probably say like will be one of the better odds to be a disappointing this year. I think he becomes a better real life quarterback, but isn't quite as good as a fantasy quarterback on a per game basis this year.
Very fair. And I mean, he wouldn't be the first great rookie fantasy quarterback to just take a slight step back. I mean, right now, we've only had 7 QB1s as a rookie since 2010. Cam, Andrew Luck, RG3, Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, most recently, Justin Herbert. Now, I'm not predicting he's going to get hurt like RG3 or, just have no semblance of a number one like Dak did with, late career Dez Bryant. Such a shame. But with Herbert, like you said, he made such a living on unstable things like him being the single best quarterback under pressure last year. Mm-hmm. That's great. Like the touchdown he had against the Saints, multiple free rushers. He can avoid it, make plays. I'm so happy he's able to do that. We shouldn't necessarily expect him to be that good again, though, in these unstable environments. Meanwhile, someone like Burrow had some people want to critique the deep ball. I'm with you. More a factor of AJ Green not being open when he was throwing deep. Why was every other receiver just fine when it happened? But we look at the stable metrics for Burrow, not under pressure, not throwing deep. From a clean pocket, he was PFF's 5th highest graded quarterback. Straight dropbacks, 4th. First and second down, 5th. No play action, 7th. Percentage of negatively graded throws, just 2nd. So maybe Herbert can get there still on volume and stuff. But, even with the coaching change, as much as that might help his real life development, we don't know if we're going to see the same fantasy friendly signal caller. And then with Jalen Hurts, are you buying any of this talk where they are still refusing to call this dude the starter? I mean, Joe Flacco is there. I don't want to get too crazy, but all of a sudden we have Watson trade rumors popping up. Flacco standing there. He's at least a guy there. And I don't know, man, like it is a point where, okay, if you take his 4-game sample size, 184 carries over an entire season, most ever. It's just going to be hard to bust at that. And even though he was a poorly graded passer, he did clear 300 yards twice. We couldn't say that about Josh Allen until his 3rd year in the league. I guess, is Hurts someone, I know we're talking redraft, so I'm with you overall. Is Hurts someone that people should be looking to sell sooner rather than later? Because I just don't see the Eagles, just maybe one quote over the offseason saying he's our guy. Would it be that hard?
Yeah, I think from a dynasty perspective, he's a guy, obviously, given my background of pursuing the quarterbacks of Jalen Hurts' archetype. I took him in the 2nd round of almost every super flex league I could last year, and I've sold him in about 75% of those.
There we go. Okay.
Just because you have this new staff that's not tied to him, you have the unknown factor of, kind of if he doesn't, even if he's just okay this year, he doesn't have to be bad. They could easily move on. This is a team that has the draft equity to do basically whatever they want, carte blanche, if they're not sold on him next year to have high picks, or if Deshaun Watson does become free and these legal matters open up, I do believe there's a lot of fire to them pursuing Deshaun Watson. And they definitely have, like I said, the draft equity to make a play for him. So I think there's just a lot of, elements in the air that could pull Jalen Hurts, down where his, dynasty stock is at an all-time high right now. And you can really profit. I was able to flip him for, multiple 1st-round picks in leagues. I got a 1st-round pick and Zach Wilson for him in a league. And I'm just going to cash out on my dollar in a lot of situations, like that. But I will say, like I said earlier about Jalen Hurts, don't discount that, he cannot be a better passer. Like he absolutely can. The one thing that he did in year one as a rookie is he just always wanted to go for the home run ball. He wanted to throw deep. If you look at like his ADOT, it was the highest in the NFL last year. And it played a big factor into his completion percentage, which was critically low, but he also from an expected completion percentage rate was also the lowest because he just kept throwing deep. So if Nick Sirianni is going to reel this in and they, just have him throw some easier passes, give him some freebies, not just always look for the home run ball. There's an easy avenue for those types of things to spike. And especially when you're not just throwing, passes to Greg Ward, every week as well. And you've got an absolute, good player like Devontae Smith to throw the ball to you. So there definitely is upside there. I think from a redraft stance, his ADP is fine, even though, like I said, a lot of that ceiling's cooked in based on the 2 breakouts we said. But he is one of those guys, unlike Herbert, like him hitting his ceiling is a problem for you to arbitrage.
Yeah.
I feel like the best season Justin Herbert can have, I can arbitrage that to a degree in my fantasy draft. Like we talked about a guy like Burrow. I think that he fits in that mold where if Jalen Hurts hits, there aren't a lot of guys that go after Jalen Hurts in drafts that can hit that ceiling. There's very few, and a lot of them are rookie quarterbacks that we'll talk about, but that's really it because everyone, like I said, has been indoctrinated to know this is the archetype of quarterback you want from a fantasy stance if you want to have a guy break the bank.
And those O-line injuries can't be overstated enough. I was writing up, Carson Wentz on the Colts, and I like 2 or 3 times I found it. I forgot about this guy being hurt. Oh, this dude didn't even play the entire season. Like when Wentz got sacked 9 times in week 1 against Washington, we probably should have just drawn a big X to the rest of the Eagles throughout the year. We will, continue to watch the film and get better. All right, man. Now we got the next kind of tier. It's veteran, low kind of rushing floor signal callers. Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Matt Ryan, and Matthew Stafford should have fairly prolific passing attacks. I don't think anyone's doubting that. We are seeing the age get up there, though, again, and we just don't have the rushing floor that everyone is now obsessed with, thanks to your fine work over the years. Current ADP, Brady's QB 11. This is courtesy of the fine folks over Underdog. Brady QB 11, Rodgers QB 10, Stafford QB 13, Matt Ryan QB 17. Pick one, Rich. Who do you think falls below where they're being drafted right now?
Well, I'll do a caveat. It's Aaron Rodgers. He's not going to be QB 10 by the time all these August drafts wrap up. He's going to bounce right back to, I think, QB 6, probably in that area, maybe even higher for some of the old school people that don't want runners and they want to base their drafts off of passing first. Listen, man, my father-in-law is definitely taking Aaron Rodgers first over all those other guys. But even for a player that has had as decorated career as Aaron Rodgers, 2020 was just absolutely insane for he and the Packers. I mean, so the Packers, they scored on 54% of their drives, which was just below the Bills. But the difference between them and the Bills is they scored a touchdown on 43% of their drives. They were just the 3rd team in NFL history to score a touchdown on over 40% of their drives. The previous 2 teams scored 26 and 20 fewer offensive touchdowns the following season. So if you just do that on a per game basis, even with us adding a game, it's a significant drop. They scored a touchdown once every 97.3 yards gained on offense. Easily the most proficient mark of the modern era. The only other team to be below 100 yards was the 2007 Patriots. Then you look at Rodgers' career high completion percentage, career high touchdown passes, 9.1% touchdown rate that you alluded to earlier. He led all passers in red zone points, despite being 6th in expected points scored in red zone. 35 red zone passing touchdowns after he had 16 or fewer passing scores in each of the 3 previous seasons in the red zone. He had a 42.7 red zone touchdown rate per pass attempt. His previous career high was 36%. He was 36 of 44 passing with 29 touchdowns, 0 interceptions inside the 10-yard line. Like what the hell is all that?
Oh
like
my God.
It is absolutely insane. He threw 8 touchdowns from the 1-yard line last year. the next highest quarterback had 4. Even for a quarterback that's had the career of Aaron Rodgers has had, regression is going to find him, and it has found him in the past. I mean, this was the 5th time in his career he's had a red zone rate over 30%, and just once has he done it in back-to-back seasons. I don't think he fully reverts back to the quarterback we saw pre-LaFleur, even though he was there in 2019, but he was absolutely flawless. You heard the stats that has dropped. Absolutely flawless throwing the football last year, and he was still the QB4 in points per game. I mean, it's just it's just really tough for him to ask even a player of Aaron Rodgers' caliber to just duplicate what he did last year because it was so insane. And even if he did, he still was outscored by 3 other quarterbacks on a point per game basis. It's just so crazy, man. It's because his rushing has decreased the past 4 years.
Yeah,
we talked about it. Maybe he has a Russell Wilson situation where he bounces back, but he obviously wasn't a runner like Russ. But I don't think we no longer can count on him to really contribute, even though I wouldn't count him as like a non-mobile quarterback. But from a fantasy stance, you're not counting on Aaron Rodgers to give you any rushing production, really.
I enjoyed the hell getting that discount on him, an underdog for the past month or so. But yeah, people, don't go chasing this. Unfortunately, I was a doofus that had Rodgers on my fade list last year for many of the reasons you just brought up. This guy was the QB 14 in points per game in 2019, the QB 10 in 2018. He was still a great real life quarterback during his stretch. I mean, Rodgers said it himself like early in the year. He said a down year for me is still a career year for most guys. Yeah, but when he's not running, man, things become that much more difficult. And we see this again and again and again. Even as great as Patrick Mahomes was in 2019 when he won the Super Bowl, his touchdown rate still went down by 3.2% compared to 2018 because it's just hard to score that many damn touchdowns per attempt. So we know on the rushing floor. And again, like we're playing fantasy football. We're not playing real life football. Right. So when he's the QB4 after being easily the best quarterback in the league, what's that tell you? Same thing. Like Derrick Henry runs for over 2,000 yards, can't, be RB1 or RB2. It's just the game we play is fantasy football and we need to play the rules accordingly. I am with you there. I'm going to also add Matt Ryan. At QB 17, it's reasonable, but he's not someone I think really just has the upside anymore, man. I'm really concerned with these splits with and without Julio Jones. And I've, barked on this podcast plenty about, quarterbacks are better with their wide receiver ones just because of a, 8-game sample from Baker Mayfield and OBJ. And the one stat I love to drop is that Patrick Mahomes without Tyreek Hill averages the same increase in yards per attempt as Baker does without OBJ. Now, no one within their right mind would try to say the Chiefs are better off without Tyreek Hill. It's an issue of a small sample, people. Now with Matt Ryan, we have a larger sample without Julio, 27 games, in fact, 0.8 fewer yards per attempt, 1.5 lower big time throw rate, higher turnover worthy play rate, lower adjusted completion rate. Is Matt Ryan someone you're trying to grab in these later rounds, or are you looking elsewhere?
No, I usually have a quarterback by the time we get there. And if I'm just going like the full streaming route, if I miss on someone that I was really targeting, there's some other, guys I think that I would target for like week 1 or early season schedules if I was forced to go that route. So he hasn't really been on my radar. He's just kind of neutral to me. Like you said, there's a reason why he's QB 17. Like no one's really in or out on him. Like it's just, kind of one of those guys. Like no one's ever excited to have Matt Ryan. You won't go broke with him, but you're not really going to profit either.
Yeah. So Aaron Rodgers, we'll see where the ADP settles. I slid him just ahead of Justin Herbert at QB 7, which, is steep. I'm probably not going to be getting a ton of them there. We'll see how that eventually plays out. Let's talk some rookies now, going from all these immobile veterans to some gunslinging mobile rookies. Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence. We're talking 2021 redraft only. Who are you taking first?
I mean, I'm taking Lawrence because if I'm in a 1 quarterback league, you can't take a guy that's not starting. Now, maybe in the next 3 weeks, we have fuller clarity on this. I will say both coaches, what they've said so far are the things they just should say. No, Kyle Shanahan and Matt Nagy have no incentive to come out right now and say Justin Fields is the starter, Trey Lance is the starter, because if they come out and they're horrible in camp and then they're horrible in the preseason, everyone's watching it, it's harder to walk back on.
Yeah.
Now, if you say, hey, these guys have to earn it, and then Justin Fields or Trey Lance or both play well in camp, play well in preseason, you can walk back. No one's going to care that Matt Nagy declared Andy Dalton the starter in June and walks back on it in August. No one's going to throw their arms up in the air. But I will say, if I'm drafting today, we also can't count on those guys starting week 1 either. And if I'm in a 1 quarterback league, listen, I'm exiting that draft with 1 quarterback. Yeah. I'm not using any bench equity on backup quarterbacks in any of the leagues I'm in. And it makes these guys interesting because they are the archetype you would want to target, right? Like these are the guys when they're on the board, when these guys are starting, they're going to be fantasy relevant. We saw with Jalen Hurts last year. He came in week 13 immediately in everyone's ranks. Everyone DFS. We're flocking to those guys. So that's kind of you need a little deeper bench leagues to kind of really, I think, to really get excited at this point of the summer. Maybe, like I said, we get some more clarity. But I'm only drafting 1 quarterback. And if I'm only going to draft 1 quarterback, my 1 quarterback league, I'm using a guy I think is going to play from week 1. And I know that Herb's got Minshew and Lawrence rotating reps too. But I think we all know Lawrence is going to be starting in week week 1. And then Lawrence also, he's a good athlete, 56th percentile career athlete. Amongst all quarterbacks since 2000, he's got good rushing production. And also we know what is Herb's offense. You know this, being a Columbus guy, dude, shotgun power runs, like he's going to be a factor inside the 10-yard line. Like they're going to use him. He's a big guy. So, I mean, you got to talk about game script and mobility. Like the Jaguars they have potential to be kind of fun. I believe we took Lawrence and had this conversation in our draft, maybe one of our only good draft picks. But if I'm forced to pick a guy, I'm going to pick Lawrence. The other guys, I'm intrigued, but I feel like they've been a little overdrafted in one quarterback format so far. Because the best ball mindset, they're great. You want these guys in best ball, right? Like I wanted to have Fields where he goes, and I want to have Lance where he goes, because if they do start in my best ball leagues, I just get their best weeks. But when I'm churning my roster in the early season, when it's the most relevant to churn your roster in fantasy football, I don't want to be saying like, oh, I took a bad quarterback, now I can't cut a guy. I've got 6 guys on my bench, but I have to keep this extra spot for this quarterback, because if this guy plays, I'm going to want to play him. I just want to go down the road. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it with Tony Pollard. I'm not sure. So, and if he's a running back, I'm not going to do it with a quarterback. So just really tough spot, I think, in one quarterback leagues to really be aggressive on those guys. Although I do believe when they play, they will be on the board to be streamers.
One quarterback caveat. Fair. Can't draft a guy that you're not going to be able to start. I get you on that. I will say, though, I think, it's a little bit different when I was exploring this idea earlier in the offseason with Taysom and Jameis. I get it. When you're drafting Zeke in round 1, you don't draft Pollard in round 10. If you're setting yourself up for your first round pick to bust, you're not going to win your fantasy league regardless. When it turns to 2 guys that are probably both taking double-digit round picks, though, I think that's where you can consider it a little bit more. And I just think, man, when week 10, week 11 comes along and Fields, Lance, and Lawrence are all starting, we're going to want Trey Lance on our football team. And I'm not a huge schedule guy, but when I see these prolonged stretches with it, it's hard to ignore, man. And my goodness, these 49ers, week 11, Jaguars, week 12, Vikings, week 13, Seahawks, week 14, Bengals, week 15, Falcons, week 16, Titans, and we get the Texans in the fantasy football championship for Trey freaking Lance in the best offense with the best play caller of the group. I had Lawrence ahead of Lance earlier in the offseason. Maybe I'm drinking too much Kool-Aid. I've been watching, looking at the same stats for 4 straight months. I shouldn't be reneging on it all. I'm just worried, man. There's too much fire and smoke with this Tim Tebow thing. I hope Lawrence is getting the snaps inside the 10-yard line. I'm going to be pissed if he's not, but I think it's now a question. And as much as I do know and love the Urban Meyer offense, that thing was broke and they had to bring in Ryan Day to fix it a couple years ago. I'm not sure if Urban is, really going to be letting Bevell and Schottenheimer actually putting their, paw prints on it. So it's very close. It's funny with some of these conversations, we're just really having to pick one over the other and they're right next to each other in the rankings and all. But I really do think if you can't afford to take 2 quarterbacks in your 1 QB leagues, pairing up Lance with our next guy I want to talk about, Kirk Cousins, is the move. Rich, I just look at my rankings every day and want to move up Cousins higher. His start to the season, Bengals, Cardinals, Seahawks, Browns, Lions, Panthers, Cowboys. He's got to be your late. Again, I know if you're just drafting one quarterback, okay, you're not worried about Kirk Cousins. If you are going to do my strategy, though, and take Lance and pair someone else, it's got to be Cousins.
Yeah, he's the guy, the bridge guy. So if you have, let's say, so in a 6 bench, format, 6 to 7 guys, if I'm a 1 quarterback league, there's no way I'm going to use one of those spots on a quarterback. I'm just going to use it on something that's higher upside for my roster, because literally on a weekly level, having the highest scoring quarterback provides the least amount of positional leverage as having the highest score in any other position. We know that it's been kind of burned into our brains. But if you have these deeper benches, and obviously if you're in a super flex league or a 2 quarterback league, Cousins is definitely the guy you pair with one of these guys. And for the reasons you laid out, not just the schedule, but Cousins is good, man. He's a real life punching bag, but he's thrown 25 or more passing touchdowns in 6 straight years. He's been 5th and 6th in the league in passing points per attempt the past 2 years. He's 7th and 3rd in yards per pass attempt the past 2 years. It's just a volume stance that limits him, but he's been good. He's been a good player. And then you bring up the schedule points with the Vikings. Kirk Cousins has played 19 games against bottom 10 defenses. He's averaged 9.4 yards per pass attempt, 278.3 passing yards per game in those contests compared to 7.2 yards per attempt, 245.9 yards per game otherwise. He is the bridge guy, man. I wish I had something to combat your lead in for this as another player, but he is. If you really want to hold Justin Fields or Trey Lance, Kirk Cousins is the bridge.
Yeah, 100%. And he is a very good real life quarterback that nobody respects as such. Since he joined the Vikings,
he's a weirdo, man.
Yeah, he is kind of a weirdo. And
he loves Nickelback. He had to do the gender reveal and couldn't even hit the ball, the balloon or whatever it was. I
haven't tweeted the gender reveal video out in like 6 months, and it's been 6 months too long because
his Q rating, if we had quarterback Q ratings, like Kirk Cousins would be at the bottom. Like no one likes him.
But yeah, the most impressive thing about his stats I found, though, he's fourth in adjusted completion rate in this group, and he is throwing the ball downfield. It's not this Jimmy G, Drew Brees, check down Charlie type of situation. Like Cousins is legit making like those $90 million throws far more often than I think people give him credit for. And hey, Mike Zimmer is trying to fix that defense. I'm not exactly sure if Patrick Peterson's corpse is going to be the spot that takes them from bad to average. I know they want to be a run first offense, but that's what makes this early season schedule so great. We're not just talking about terrible teams. We do have the Lions and Panthers in there, but the Cowboys, Seahawks, Cardinals, Bengals, these are great offenses with not very good defenses. We're going to see some totals in the high 50s. Dare I say, even starting with a 6 perhaps. All right, Rich, got a couple more questions here. 2 quarterbacks available in the late QB 20 range. I'm sure if you people are in one QB leagues, you're not touching them regardless, nor should you. Carson Wentz, Sam Darnold, both objectively bad last year. Much better situations. Are you drinking the Kool-Aid on either player having a good comeback year?
It's tough. I have a real hard time with Wentz just because it's not a 1-year thing with Wentz. Like he's really been kind of a bad quarterback, except for 2017, which people credit to Frank Reich, but he did the Justin Herbert thing at a way higher level. He was just a massive outlier in winning on long downs and distances, and that regressed, and he's never got it back over the course of his career. And also, I mean, look at this Colts like surrounding group of skill players. Yeah, the offensive line is better than what he had, but not a lot. This group doesn't do a lot for me. The Pittman, Hilton, Paris Campbell. I think that there's a case to be made for, Pittman and Campbell being better and beating ADP, but I don't think any of those guys are like world beating type receivers that are going to elevate a guy like Carson Wentz, or having Carson Wentz and vice versa elevate those guys. And the tight ends aren't really that exciting either. I mean, we all want the Mo Cox to finally be utilized, but the Colts team hell-bent on avoiding that. I mean, they've got Captain Jack Doyle, who's going to catch a 6-yard pass and fall down. But I'm just not excited about Carson Wentz really on any level. I mean, Sam Darnold the same way. I mean, you look at him, he's like, what are we supposed to latch on to here? He hasn't been like afforded much help, but I mean, he's been the QB 34, the QB 26, and the QB 39 in points per game through 3 seasons in the league. Last year from a clean pocket, he averaged 6.3 yards per pass attempt. It was ahead of only Mike Glennon and Nick Foles. He's going to have a lot better options here in Carolina. I think it helps him. The one thing I will say about Darnold, though, is you're going to know right away. If you're in your 2 QB league, or if you somehow talk yourself into going one quarterback and just streaming him, the opening schedule is what you kind of are looking at. We'll know right away if he's going to bounce back or not. He opens with the revenge game, the Jets, who have, a terrible secondary. Robert Salah might be a wizard, but we'll have to find out, then he gets the Texans and the Cowboys. Like, we're going to know really right away, like, how the Sam Darnold thing is going to go. And we are not going to have to sit on the fence and, hem and haw about this a month into the season. Like, we are going to know basically 3 weeks in the season, like, is this going to happen for him or not? And is he going to be a guy? I would say there's enough intrigue there to at least say maybe he taps into something that we saw when he was as a prospect. He's also a guy that also, when I go back to my quarterback model, he doesn't really grade highly. Like, he was never really an objectively great prospect either, which doesn't help me really latch onto it. But I do like a number of the Carolina players, and I do kind of believe into the system they're trying to establish. And obviously, you get Christian McCaffrey too. If you could just dump it off to him enough, you might be okay. I'm really only looking at it from a schedule stance. If you squint, and I can look at the Darnold schedule and say, okay, I'll at least bite on that a little bit. But both guys, I think, are kind of a stretch for me to like fully latch onto.
Get those first 3 games and send him off. It'd be so much easier to get behind Darnold if he wasn't so badly outplayed by Joe Flacco in the exact same atrocious situation last year, people. Like, that's the problem. And Flacco, like, one of the biggest problems with Darnold, I know the Jets O-line has not been good. I wouldn't call them good by any stretch, but as us at PFF, like we've shown over the years, like, pressure tends to be more of a QB stat. We all know how much better of an athlete Sam Darnold is than Joe Flacco. Why was Darnold averaging 2.9 sacks per game last year, and Flacco was at 1.8. It's because Darnold holds on to the damn ball for too long. And I'm a sucker for, your quarterbacks that, show off the backyard playmaking, off script ability. That's why I still talk about Drew Lock on this podcast, and people are probably tired about it. But Darnold, man, you see it every once in a while, but all we can really go back to is like that 4-game stretch at the end of 2018 where he was doing that a little more often. And even then he was like an average, average to above average fantasy quarterback for 4 games and a 3-year sample. Maybe you can make those first 3 weeks happen. And hey, if I'm wrong on this and it ends up being a, change of scenery situation, great. But from what we've seen so far, I'm with you.
Their offensive line sucks too. Like if you to compare, honestly, the Jets offensive line right now, if he was to stay on the Jets offensive line as is constructed today versus the Panthers is a no contest. Yeah. It's a no contest of which offensive line is better.
Unreal. Rich, complete this sentence. Ryan Tannehill will finish as a top blank quarterback in 2021.
Top eight quarterback. 8. I don't know if that's spicy enough.
I like it. But, I was gonna say 12, so you beat me.
He's easily my favorite quarterback at draft cost this summer. He's my most drafted quarterback to this point. Even with efficiency regression last year off of his 2019 season, he still closed 2020 as a QB 10 in points per game. He's now been a top 10 weekly fantasy scorer in 16 of his 26 starts with the Titans. He was 3rd in points per dropback last year after being 2nd in points per dropback the year before. So where Ryan Tannehill wins, and this being a PFF guy, is on the intermediate levels. His EPA on throws to the intermediate levels is so insane. And as part of that is, the play action Derrick Henry stuff. You suck defenses in, you throw right over the linebackers and you just crush it. Well, who was the number 1 wide receiver in intermediate EPA last year? It was Julio Jones. So we add a perfect marriage of weaponry with a guy that we're already high on and has been efficient. Pair him with one of our favorites, Arthur Juan Brown. He's got 2 top 10 basically wide receivers in terms of talent. We don't know if Julio so much as a wide receiver 1 in terms of fantasy anymore, but in terms of talent, Julio still averaged 100 yards receiving per game in his healthy games last year. He can still play. The one thing with Tannehill that is interesting in the Titans in general is this chicken and egg stuff between their offensive efficiency and Arthur Smith, and we're going to get a lot of clarity on this year. I tend to side with players more than coaches on this stuff. I believe that Arthur Smith was able to have a lot of success. I believe he's a good coach, but he was able to have a lot of success because he had Derrick Henry, Arthur Juan, Tannehill playing good football. Will the Falcons be able to roll over all the efficiency that just the Titans had? I don't believe so. And that's, your transitive property narrative that you always see with these coaching fallacies. I think Arthur Smith's fine. Good coach. Probably he deserves some credit for coaxing, this revamped production from Ryan Tannehill. But Ryan Tannehill's still in the same offensive weaponry he's had. You add Julio Jones. I believe the coaching staff is not ignorant enough to say we just did this for 2 years. We're going to do this all differently. There's no way. That's not going to happen. And then you talk about Tannehill's situation. We talk about the weaponry. He's got a healthier offensive line. That offensive line was banged up last year. He still has Derrick Henry. He plays in the AFC South, which we love. And their defense objectively is going to be subpar again. Maybe we'll get some more games like they had against the Browns last year, where we got Tannehill even throwing the ball more. And then, obviously with Derrick Henry's impact on this offense, no one wants Derrick Henry to get hurt. I don't either. But if you were to miss some time, this offense drastically changes. Yeah. It drastically changes, and the ball is in Ryan Tannehill's hands more, and he's mobile. So I'm all in on the Tannehill fantasy outlook this season.
I think the point about why I know Arthur Smith is gone. It's not ideal. Why do we expect the offense to look different? I mean, if we were bringing in an offensive coordinator from someone else that had a history of running a different offense, okay. Todd Downing has been the Titans tight end coach for the past 2 years. What was Arthur Smith before he got the offensive coordinator job? Their tight end coach. It would make sense for them to run pretty much the same offense that's been successful. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And until we have a reason to believe Tannehill won't be a top 10 quarterback, which he's been for the past 2 years, I don't think we should be treating him as anything different. And it is funny how, we get injury predictor Twitter out here saying, Mixon, Carson, Henry, whoever it is, whoever the flavor of the week is that we're going to say is only going to be there for 3 games. If you really believe in that by yourself, react accordingly. If you think Chris Carson is going to play 5 games and get hurt, you should be loading up on the Seahawks pass catchers. Same way in Tennessee. If you think, the 400 touch curse is going to be real, never mind that Henry had 400 plus touches, including playoffs in 2019, seemed just fine in 2020. I won't get into that. But again, people, if you want to make that stand, maybe go ahead and look at how the ramifications might be if it comes to fruition. Rich, fantastic stuff. I have one quick round, true or false. I know you're long-winded, so if you want to go off, King. But if you can, keep it to just a sentence or two of reasoning. First up, Baker Mayfield will finish as a top 12 signal caller, true or false?
I'll say false. I mean, he's just a guy that we still want to stream and pick our spots. Yeah. He's still better against spots that teams that cannot rush the passer, and he just doesn't have that rushing equity. He's in that very much of the Kirk Cousins mold that we talked about. Pick your spots with him.
Agreed. Somehow drafted as the QB4 in 2019. How quickly Baker has fallen down. Tua cements his status as the Dolphins franchise QB this year.
I'm in from a reality stance. I think he still makes more of a real life jump than a fantasy jump as in terms of being a consistent QB1 in fantasy. He's another guy I think that's going to be a guy you pick your spots with, but he finally just has guys that could get open. I mean, this kid was pressed into throwing passes to Jakeem Grant and, Durton Smythe or whoever his name is. Is that his name? He was like his fourth highest. Lynn Bowden he's got guys that can get open. Will Fuller, Jalen Waddle, guys that can get open. Definitely buying him being better.
And real quick, just to help continue to spread some fake news on this podcast, one of my favorite fake tweets from the day, Tua wildly overthrew a 10-yard out route to Jalen Waddle and hit a fan in the face. The fan appears to be bleeding heavily and is receiving medical attention. Come on, people, don't fall for this. Next one, injury potential aside, Ryan Fitzpatrick starts 17 games.
I mean, if I was a betting man, I would say false. I would take the under if I was betting. We're all Fitzmagic fans. The Fitzmagic war rig is absolutely real too. You should be excited about Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel, even Antonio Gibson, even though they'll probably throw more inside the 10 this year than they did last year. But let's not pretend that Ryan Fitzpatrick, for all the love we have for him, is not capable of self-sabotage either. Yeah. And then when you look at the situation that he's pressed in this year, on this Washington football team paired with a good defense, a good offensive line, this might not be the complete hair on fire Fitzpatrick we've come to know and love either as well. It might be a little more reined in version of the beard. I don't want to speak negative on him. I don't want this to turn into a negative mindset thing. I'm just saying, if you were asking me to bet the over under on a full season, I'd have to default take the under.
That's fair. And, I have been hyping up Fitz a lot as like one of the prime late round QBs. I will say though, usually when I'm actually in the course of a draft, I end up being able to get Baker or Kirk Cousins at a more reasonable cost, and I just take them over Fitz. Like we could,
a lot of people target Fitz.
Yeah, we could imagine how it works out, but it's been booming a hell of a lot more than busting in recent history. Probably shouldn't necessarily assume that's going to keep on keeping on. All right, Daniel Jones looks more like the guy we saw in 2019 compared to 2020. True or false?
I mean, it just self-corrected. I mean, year one, he had a 5.2% touchdown rate when it should have been more like in the low fours than last year. The way regression works just sapped him completely. He had a 2.5% touchdown rate. He threw 8.6 fewer touchdown passes than his expectation. Only Teddy Bridgewater and Cam Newton were worse. But where Daniel Jones, he has to prove to me, because a lot of people keep calling this Josh Allen and Daniel Jones like corollary, where Daniel Jones has to make this leap, though, is in terms of pocket presence and in the red zone. I mean, this dude has just absolutely no feel for the pocket whatsoever. And then when the Giants get close to the paint, I mean, he's just been absolutely dreadful both years. I mean, even last year, he threw 7 touchdown passes on 54 pass attempts in the red zone. Just 18 of those 54 pass attempts came inside the 10-yard line. You hope a guy like Kenny Galladay can open that up, maybe win as a clasher, but he's really all they added that wins in that area of the field. So, I mean, I want to keep a candle on for Daniel Jones because he kind of fits like that mold of like, he could run a little bit, but also the thing the Giants don't do is they don't use him as a runner. He is through 2 years, Daniel Jones has 4 career rushing attempts inside the 10-yard line. For a team that has struggled to score so many damn touchdowns, why wouldn't they use him more when he's forcing passes to Evan Ingram in the paint? One thing he did, he's mobile. Use him. Use his legs, Jason Garrett. Cue your picture that you send out every Thursday about Jason Garrett on the train. What the hell's going on? I want to believe in Daniel Jones because I think he'd be fun at his ceiling. We just have a pretty large sample of him being really bad.
once I am fully moved into my new Cincinnati apartment, I will have that Jason Garrett train picture framed and in the background accordingly. Yeah, 29 fumbles over the past 2 years for Daniel Jones. Please spare me the touchdown interception ratio comparison without including that, people. Be better. But yeah, it was funny. Like the only reason why Jones was kind of like streamable for certain weeks last year was because of his rushing. And we talked about how Kyler fell off after the shoulder injury. When Jones had that hamstring injury, man, like the same thing happened. This offense just stopped being able to move the ball. It's great we got some more weapons in there, but when Jason Garrett and PFF's single worst ranked offensive line going to the year are involved, I'm going to pass.
My favorite Daniel Jones anecdote, and you can Google this, it's real quick. Last year in a non-contact practice, he got strip sacked.
Oh my God. I think my favorite one is that Dak Prescott scored more total touchdowns last year than Daniel Jones.
Oh, it's rough, man. It's rough.
At first, I thought it was a tie, and I sent out the tweet and stuff, and I was getting, a ton of love. And then I realized I was like, holy shit, I forgot Dak's receiving touchdown. It was actually more. We'll get better. Last two. Taysom Hill wins the Saints QB job outright, starts from week 1 on.
I'm going to actually say no, even though it's popular. It's yes. Now, I want Taysom Hill to be the quarterback because for fantasy, I just believe I'd rather have Taysom Hill start and just know I've got my safe bet of points, and then I'll run into some spike weeks, as opposed to Jameis. If Jameis starts, like, what do you do on a week-to-week basis with Jameis without Michael Thomas? Like, with this weaponry? Like, there's no way. There's just no stable floor. At least with Taysom Hill, we know there's a floor. But I actually believe that they're going to start Jameis with, and I know a lot of people have taken this Michael Thomas injury and said the opposite, but so the way Taysom Hill plays, it's great if you want to do that for like a month, like they did last year, and bridge till Drew Brees comes back. And they did it with Teddy Bridgewater the year before, where the Saints just went ultra conservative, and because they knew Brees was coming back. Now, if you try to do that for a full 17-game season and play that way, I just think there's so much fragility to do that. And the Saints can't be successful over the course of the season doing that. It's just way too much to say that we're going to play turnover-free football, try to limit possessions, try to cut the mistakes down. I don't think that that's a stable way to approach playing football like people believe it is. And I believe they're going to want to go for a little more upside, even though there's a lot more downside with Jameis Winston. But there's just a lot more upside from a passing stance. We've seen there was a DB quote from this week that talked about Taysom Hill on first reads. And I think that you guys do as a PFF stat. He was by number 1 in first read pass attempts, like by a tremendous margin. And then you just can't play football like that. I don't believe you can play. You can do it for a month and get to when Drew Brees comes back. But if you're going to come into the season and say, we're going to do this for 17 games and be a playoff team, I don't believe that that's possible.
We're talking about when we think of Kirk Cousins, we think of the terrible gender reveal throw. When I think of Taysom Hill, I think of that triple crow hop throw to Emmanuel Sanders, who's like 10 yards behind everyone. He has to come sprinting back to the ball in order to catch it. And that was like his longest completion of the season. Yeah, it was just so gimmicky. And Taysom, it's annoying because he's a really fun, like if he wasn't so annoying for us in fantasy, I feel like people would love Taysom Hill, like for someone to be able to play that many positions. And he's so physical, like the whole alpha male jackhammer bit the Saints Twitter did a couple of years ago, like all that stuff is great. But when it takes away from everyone else, it becomes such a problem. But yeah, if he wins the job, now that Michael Thomas is out of the picture, I'm not worried about, Taysom really messing up Alvin Kamara. They just don't have anyone else to give the ball to at that point. So Taysom wins that job. We're going to be, it might not be pretty, but we'll be taking those rush attempts in Fantasyland. That's for sure. Finally, Rich, last question. You've been fantastic. Big Ben enables not 1, not 2, but 3 top 30 PPR receivers. When history would tell us, probably turns in a decent enough season himself.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say false. I mean, I just think that there's too much of a signal from the Steelers. Like the Steelers are literally trying to tell us that they don't want to have the passing splits they've had the past 2 years with Ben. Then they're gonna run the ball more. Also, Najee Harris is a great receiver, so they're probably going to throw to him more than they threw to their running backs. And then also, I mean, they might even run more 12 personnel with the addition of Pat Freiermuth. Like they could run more 12 personnel. We're expecting. I mean, I think that the Steelers wide receivers are all really great players. I love them all. I've had a really tough time, though, at clicking the button on any of them at ADP when presented other opportunities around those guys. I always just find myself talking myself into the stability of someone else around them more. But I mean, I just feel like the Steelers are genuinely really trying to tell us, like they're not going to throw the football as much as they did last year.
And I do think it's a good practice to look at, these teams that have the wide receivers with high ADPs and the tight ends with high ADPs, and the quarterback has the low one. And three, there's like 4 examples this year. I say Pittsburgh, to an extent, I think people are kind of putting Claypool and Juju down enough so they don't necessarily qualify. But Washington, the Falcons, and the Vikings are these teams that we really expect to have great fantasy players in their offense, not necessarily have a great fantasy quarterback. And since 2010, when we look at teams that had 3 at least top 24 wide receivers or a top 12 tight end, 16 of 20 of those quarterbacks were also top 12 signal callers. So I know Ben didn't look great last year and all that. This was still the 12th ranked scoring offense, people. I'm just saying, if we start seeing this Pittsburgh offense, turning it up a little bit and all 3 receivers doing well, it's going to mean Big Ben's going to be pretty well himself. But, when we look at Sam Darnold or a situation like that, maybe you can take the opposite approach and say, hold on, should we be that high on DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, et cetera, et cetera? Rich, fantastic.
You remember we did this like two years ago when Eli Manning, when the Giants had everyone going in like the top 3 rounds. It was Odell, Saquon, and Evan Ingram at the point when he was still hot and had the high ADP. Everyone was like, look at all the ADPs of these guys. Eli Manning. It's just tough, man. It's real hard to just kind of go down there. But if all those Steelers do get there, though, like you said, it will be as a byproduct. Like Ben had to play well himself.
Oh yeah, and we just got to figure out which way we're going. Sometimes people are like, "How are we not more in on Ben?" It's like, well, maybe we shouldn't be as in on those other guys. Well, Rich, everyone can find you on Twitter at Lord Reebs. You just came out with a great article called "Not All Targets Are Created Equal." It's one, we've had targets and carries and just the same old stats for a while. They're not equal, and we need to, reference that. And one of the things I love doing is this like running back opportunity score where we weight targets more appropriately with the fantasy points they're expected, exactly what you were able to do with targets, end zone, downfield, all that. Everyone make sure you go check that out over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. I'm sure you have plenty more goodness on the way throughout the off season. Thanks so much, man. And any final thoughts or content you want to get off your chest?
No, I mean, it was great you having me on. I'll be excited to see you in a few weeks in Canton.
Sure.
Just check out my stuff, sharpfootballanalysis.com. I've got tons of free stuff up there, even though we'll be switching to more subscriber content this last month. But I've got literally over 70 free articles up on the site that you could go back and check in that will not be paywalled or anything. So you can go check that stuff out.
Get to it, people. Again, at Lord Reebs, the one, the only Rich Hribar. Great stuff, man. Thank you again. Thank you all for listening to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. New episodes every single day. And like I said, first of many more positional overview pods, get you all ready to go win some more leagues this year. So he's Rich. I'm Ian. Until next time, take care, everybody.